It was the winter of 1944, and Italy was bleeding. From the shattered ruins of Cassino to the frozen ridges near Anzio, Allied and Axis forces were locked in a brutal, grinding campaign. The promise of a quick liberation had dissolved into a slow, agonizing advance northward. Yet behind the chaos of open warfare, another kind of battle was taking shape. One fought in the shadows, where secrecy was as vital as firepower. It was here that the Office of Strategic Services, the forerunner to the CIA, began to wage its own war. By February, intelligence officers in Algiers and Naples had intercepted a pattern in German radio traffic. Encrypted transmissions from northern Italy appeared to coordinate troop movements and supply lines for the Wehrmacht's retreat toward the Gothic Line, a heavily fortified defensive barrier stretching from the Tyrrhenian Sea to the Adriatic. The OSS, working closely with British SOE units, traced these signals to a hidden relay station deep in the Apennine Mountains, somewhere near Medina. The discovery presented both an opportunity and a dilemma. If the Allies could neutralize the site, they might cripple German command communications across the entire Italian front. But reaching it meant venturing far behind enemy lines. Enter Captain James Donovan, a 32-year-old OSS officer with a reputation for daring. A lawyer turned intelligence operative, Donovan had served previously in North Africa and southern France, coordinating partisan sabotage operations. His team would be small, 8 men in total, including 2 Italian partisans, a British signals expert, and a demolitions sergeant from the U.S. Rangers. Their mission, code-named Operation Ravenwood, was simple on paper: infiltrate, destroy, and disappear. The reality was far more perilous. The plan was approved in late February 1944. According to declassified mission outlines, the team trained for 2 weeks outside Bari under OSS Special Operations Branch. They studied aerial reconnaissance photographs, practiced night parachute drops, and memorized local dialect phrases to blend in if separated. They carried silenced M3 submachine guns, folding carbines, and packs of Composition C explosives, the standard kit for sabotage missions of the time. But the true weapon, Donovan noted in his final briefing log, would be stealth, patience, and the goodwill of those who still believe Italy can be free. On the night of March 10th, AC-47 Dakota lifted off from a makeshift airstrip near Foggia. The weather was poor, low clouds, gusting winds, but there was no delay. The aircraft crossed the Apennines under cover of darkness, navigating by moonlight and compass. The jump was scheduled for 2:10. At 2:06, the pilot circled once over what he believed to be the designated drop zone. But somewhere in the storm, the coordinates had drifted. When Donovan and his men leapt into the black void, they were nearly 15 kilometers off course. Scattered and disoriented, the team regrouped near a wooded valley southeast of Montefiorino. The terrain was rugged and unforgiving, steep ridges, frozen streams, and the constant echo of distant artillery. German patrols from the 16th SS Panzergrenadier Division were rumored to be operating in the region, hunting partisans and suspected Allied agents. The OSS men had no way of knowing how close they already were to one of the most heavily guarded sectors in northern Italy. A local farmer named Pietro Calderini would later testify that, in the early hours of March 11th, he heard whispers of English voices and saw flickering lights in the hills. By dawn, those lights were gone. Only the faint hum of a German truck convoy remained. For the next 48 hours, the OSS team went silent. Intelligence records show no radio transmission from Donovan's unit after 4 o'clock on March 11th. Their last encoded message, "Eagle in the clouds, moving north," was intercepted by Allied command in Naples. Then, nothing. For headquarters, it was an eerie echo of so many other OSS missions: high hopes, quick contact, and sudden disappearance. In the war diaries of Major Arthur Harkins, Donovan's commanding officer, there's a single line dated March 14, 1944, "Ravenwood overdue. Area compromised. Recommend silence." It's believed this order meant one thing: to deny all knowledge of the operation if questioned. The mission had effectively vanished into the Italian mountains. But the story didn't end there. 3 nights after Donovan's last message, villagers near Montefiorino reported distant explosions rolling through the valley. Some said it was German artillery testing new weapons. Others whispered of a firefight near an abandoned monastery. When dawn came, German units were seen rushing north, yet no official record mentions any combat in that sector. Was this the sound of Operation Ravenwood achieving its objective, or the final moments of a team lost to history? No one at OSS headquarters could say for sure. But in the days that followed, intercepted German transmissions from Medina abruptly stopped, the very network the OSS had been ordered to destroy. Something had happened in those mountains. Something big enough to silence both friend and foe. And so began the mystery of the secret OSS raid that would, in time, alter the course of the war in Italy. March 1944. The Italian countryside was a place of ghosts, quiet villages half buried in rubble, burned farmhouses standing like gravestones, and mountain passes echoing with the clatter of German convoys. Amid this harsh landscape, Captain James Donovan's OSS team was now alone, cold, and dangerously off course. Their intended drop zone had been a meadow south of Pavollo nel Frignano, a neutral patch chosen for its isolation and proximity to the suspected German relay site. But the windstorm that night had thrown the C-47 miles off track. Instead, Donovan's men came down near Montefiorino, an area thick with Wehrmacht patrols and dotted with small partisan bands whose loyalties were uncertain. For a clandestine operation, it was a nightmare start. The team regrouped by dawn. Donovan checked his compass and maps, realizing their extraction point was now nearly 20 kilometers away. Lieutenant Peter Mallory, the British signals expert, reported damage to the team's radio antenna. They could receive Allied signals, but not transmit, meaning they were effectively cut off from command. The demolition sergeant, Frank Larkin, muttered, "Hell of a place to get lost." Donovan's reply was sharp but calm. "We adapt. That's what we do." The men buried their parachutes, disguised themselves in civilian coats provided by Italian sympathizers, and began moving north through the hills. The weather turned against them. Freezing rain, fog so thick they could barely see one another. Yet their training kept them focused. They moved at night, resting by day in barns or caves, relying on the help of peasants who risked their lives to feed them. In his field journal, recovered decades later, Mallory wrote, "It is not the Germans I fear most, but the silence, this endless waiting for the moment we will either strike or die." By the third night, they made contact with a small partisan cell led by Sergio Moretti, a 26-year-old former soldier of the Italian Royal Army. Moretti's men had been ambushing German supply trucks along the Medina road and were initially suspicious of the Americans. But when Donovan showed him the OSS insignia and mentioned the plan to hit a German communication relay near Monteomburo, Moretti's suspicion turned to quiet respect. He told Donovan, "There are 2 relay towers there, guarded by SS men, but also something more. They say it's connected to Berlin." That line caught Donovan's attention. The OSS briefing had mentioned a high-frequency relay facility, but the claim that it connected directly to Berlin hinted at something larger. Perhaps a command relay for Kesselring's entire Italian theater. Destroying it could paralyze enemy coordination across northern Italy. For Donovan, the mission stakes had just escalated. The combined group, the OSS 8 and 6 partisans, moved toward Monteomburo. Their journey took them through dense forests and mine-laden roads. Twice they narrowly avoided capture by German patrols. One night, they stumbled upon a convoy of Wehrmacht trucks stuck in the mud. Donovan ordered silence, watching from the shadows as soldiers cursed and shoveled until the engines roared back to life. Every movement in the dark was a heartbeat away from discovery. Meanwhile, OSS command in Naples waited anxiously. Radio silence stretched into its 4th day. Intelligence intercepts hinted at German troop movements intensifying near the Medina sector, a sign they might have detected foreign operatives. Yet without communication, there was no way to warn Donovan's men. The operation now existed in total isolation. By March 14th, the team reached a ridgeline overlooking the target area. Through binoculars, Donovan and Mallory saw a walled compound at the edge of a forest. 2 radio towers rising from its center, floodlights sweeping the perimeter, and a garrison estimated at 30 soldiers. It was far more fortified than expected. The partisans suggested attacking at dawn when guard changes occurred, but Donovan refused. "We strike when they sleep," he said. "If we wake them, we're dead." That night, under a thin crescent moon, they prepared their assault. Larkin primed his charges, plastic explosives with pencil fuses set to detonate after 20 minutes. The plan: infiltrate the compound, place charges on the relay generators, and escape through the eastern woods before sunrise. Simple in theory, deadly in practice. But even as they moved, something went wrong. A flare shot up from the compound. A German sentry had spotted movement near the wire. Machine gun fire erupted, slicing through the darkness. Larkin and Moretti dove for cover, returning fire with silenced carbines. Donovan barked orders. "Go loud! Move!" And the night exploded in chaos. The team split in two. Donovan led the main charge toward the generator building, while Mallory and a partisan carried the radio pack toward higher ground to try re-establishing contact. Within minutes, explosions rocked the compound. Flames burst from the generator sheds, consuming cables and antenna wires. For a brief moment, the mission seemed a success. Then came the counterattack. SS troops poured out of nearby barracks, firing blindly into the smoke. One by one, the radio signals from Donovan's unit faded. The last message ever received from Operation Ravenwood was transmitted at 3:22. Objective aflame. Extraction impossible. Godspeed. At dawn, German patrols swept the hills, but there was no trace of the OSS team. Only the smoldering remains of the radio towers, and a single scorched helmet lying in the mud. What happened to Donovan and his men after that night remains one of the most haunting mysteries in the history of Allied espionage. The morning after the explosions near Monte Ombrero, a thick haze clung to the valley. The acrid smell of burned fuel mixed with the distant hum of German patrols combing the hills. Locals would later describe it as a silence unlike any other. A silence that felt watched, one farmer said. To the people of the Emilia-Romagna region, war had already brought fear, but on that morning of March 15, 1944, fear had become something else: uncertainty. Within hours, the German command in Medina issued a region-wide curfew. SS patrols swept through villages, interrogating farmers, arresting suspected partisans, and shooting anyone found with Allied materials. The propaganda bulletins claimed that enemy saboteurs had been intercepted and neutralized, but no details followed. Unofficial reports filtered through the underground partisan network that an American-led team had attacked a German relay post and vanished before dawn. One of the first reliable accounts came from a man named Carlo Fontanesi, a local shepherd. He claimed that during the night of the explosions, he saw lights like fireflies moving along the ridge, followed by a blinding flash and the roar of fire. When he went to investigate after sunrise, the ground was still warm, the air heavy with smoke. He found twisted metal, fragments of detonators, and what appeared to be a torn sleeve bearing the faint outline of an Allied insignia. Before he could take it, German soldiers arrived, forcing him to flee into the woods. Meanwhile, the OSS station in Naples remained in the dark. It had been 5 days since Donovan's last transmission. The only information came indirectly, from British signal intelligence intercepting erratic German transmissions. Communication across the northern sector had broken down. Messages once routed through Medina were now being sent manually by courier, causing confusion among Axis divisions. "Their network is bleeding," one OSS officer remarked, "but we can't tell who's holding the knife." By mid-March, resistance fighters in the region began whispering about an Allied ghost unit. The legend spread quickly. 8 men dropped by parachute, who struck the Germans and then disappeared into the mountains. For many Italian partisans, the story was both inspiration and warning. The war was filled with unseen heroes, and just as many who never came back. Archival German field reports later uncovered in Stuttgart give us a glimpse of what the enemy saw. A report dated March 16, from Oberleutnant Ernst Kruger of the 16th SS Panzergrenadier Division, reads, "Sabotage of relay station near Monte Ombrero confirmed. Severe damage to generator and transmitter towers. Enemy group presumed 6 to 10 men. Engaged by our forces. Contact lost after detonation. No bodies recovered. No bodies recovered. That line would echo for decades in OSS post-war inquiries. It implied that Donovan's team had not been captured, or at least, not found. Were they killed in the blast? Did they escape? Or had the Germans taken them alive, hiding their capture for intelligence purposes? Survivor theories emerged after the war. One came from a partisan messenger who claimed to have guided 2 injured foreigners, one limping, one silent, toward the mountains above Zaka 3 days after the explosions. He said they carried no weapons, only a battered satchel and a torn radio pack. When asked later who they were, he simply said, "They vanished into the clouds." OSS headquarters took this report seriously enough to include it in a 1945 memorandum titled Missing Agents, Northern Italy Sector. It noted possible survivors from Operation Ravenwood and speculated that they might have linked up with partisan units operating under General Luigi Pieri's command. But no further sightings were ever confirmed. In Naples, Donovan's commanding officer, Major Harkins, was ordered to close the mission file. "We have no evidence of survival," read the directive. "The team is presumed lost." Yet Harkins refused to believe it. In his private diary, declassified only in 1979, he wrote, "I know Jim Donovan. If there was a chance to finish what he started, he'd take it. And he'd stay quiet until it was done." Weeks turned into months. As the Allies pushed north after the fall of Rome in June 1944, the region of Medina remained fiercely contested. The remnants of the 16th SS Division withdrew into fortified positions along the Gothic Line, still struggling with disrupted communications. The OSS, meanwhile, quietly began reviewing German signal maps captured by advancing troops. To their astonishment, the relay codes once attributed to Monteombro never reappeared in any subsequent transmissions. The site had gone permanently dark. Some within OSS intelligence began to speculate that Donovan's team had succeeded far beyond expectations. By destroying the main relay and possibly intercepting encryption materials before the blast, they might have fractured the coordination of German command in central Italy. If true, it would have been one of the most successful small-unit sabotage missions of the war, accomplished at the cost of total disappearance. But without evidence, it was only conjecture. For locals, the memory of that night became legend, told in whispers to children long after the war ended. They spoke of strangers who fell from the sky, who fought a battle no one saw, and who walked into the mountains never to return. And somewhere, deep in those same hills, under the ruins of a burned monastery, villagers would years later find something buried beneath the ash, a single American dog tag. The name was almost erased by fire, but just legible enough to read. Larkin, F. The discovery reignited questions that had never been answered. Had the OSS team died there, or had someone wanted their story buried with them? Spring turned to summer, and the Allied front in Italy surged northward. Yet in the aftermath of Monteombro, an eerie absence remained. Reports filtered in from advancing troops, burned-out transmitter stations, abandoned listening posts, and empty bunkers. But of Captain James Donovan and his OSS team, there was no trace. What little evidence survived raised more questions than answers. In early July 1944, a reconnaissance patrol from the U.S. 10th Mountain Division entered a ruined monastery near the village of Verica, just east of Monteombro. The building had been shelled weeks earlier, its cloisters blackened, its walls pocked with bullet holes. Beneath the rubble, soldiers uncovered fragments of American equipment, a broken field radio, a compass engraved with U.S. markings, and an empty satchel bearing the faded stenciling OSS, Bari. But there were no bodies. Not a single human remain. Inside the main hall, scorched markings covered the stone walls, jagged etchings of what appeared to be letters and numbers. One soldier, Sergeant William Moore, later described them as burned into the plaster, like someone tried to write in smoke. Intelligence officers photographed the symbols, sending them to Allied command in Naples. Linguists initially dismissed them as random damage, but months later, when the photos were revisited, cryptographers recognized fragments resembling portions of the German Enigma key series, the codes used to encrypt Wehrmacht communications. Had Donovan's team found something? Were they trying to send a final message before being overrun? No one could be sure. German documents recovered after the war added another layer of intrigue. Among them was a field report dated March 17, 1944, from SS Hauptsturmführer Karl Reiser, commander of security operations in Medina. His report read, "Enemy sabotage unit engaged near Monteomburo. One radio station destroyed. Captured enemy equipment recovered. Several prisoners transported to secure facility north of Bologna. Situation under control." Yet when Allied intelligence cross-referenced prisoner transfer lists after the war, there was no record of any captured Americans from that sector. No names. No numbers. Nothing. It was as if Reiser's report had been written to appease superiors, or to hide something. Adding to the mystery, Reiser himself disappeared in April 1945 as the German army retreated. Post-war investigators never located him. Some believed he fled to Austria under a false identity. Others thought he had been executed by Italian partisans for collaborating in mass reprisals. Without him, the truth of what happened to the captured enemy unit died with his command. Meanwhile, the OSS continued to dig quietly. A memo dated September 1944, now declassified, reveals that American intelligence had intercepted strange coded traffic from northern Italy weeks after Donovan's disappearance. The signals used an improvised cipher, not German, not Italian, and included phrases like "Raven confirmed" and "Bridge silent." Analysts couldn't determine the source. Could it have been remnants of Donovan's team trying to communicate through partisan channels? Or was someone else using their call signs to mislead Allied intelligence? Lieutenant Peter Mallory's name reappeared once more, in an unexpected place: the interrogation notes of a captured German radio technician. Under questioning, the technician described an English-speaking prisoner, held briefly at a communications outpost near Bologna in late March 1944. He was injured, the technician recalled, but he spoke calmly, asking about frequencies and transmitters. Then he was gone the next day. They told us he had been transferred. We never saw him again. Mallory had been the team's radio officer. If this story was true, it meant at least one of the OSS agents had survived the initial explosion, and possibly continued working behind enemy lines before disappearing again. By the end of 1944, Operation Ravenwood was officially classified as a mission unconfirmed. Donovan and his men were listed as missing in action. But within the OSS, whispers persisted that the team's sabotage had dealt a decisive blow to German operations in northern Italy. General Alexander's after-action reports noted a severe disruption in Axis communication across the Po Valley, forcing divisions to rely on unreliable courier systems. Enemy operational tempo drastically reduced, the report stated. The timing matched perfectly with the destruction of the Monteomburo relay. Still, the personal fate of Donovan's team haunted those who knew them. Major Harkins, who had overseen the mission, never forgave himself. In a letter to his wife written after the war, he confessed, "There are men whose graves I can visit. Donovan's team has none. They exist only in the silence of those mountains, where something happened that even history refuses to name." In 1952, local children exploring the monastery ruins uncovered a buried metal box containing a single photograph, blurred, water-damaged, but unmistakably showing men in Allied uniforms standing beside Italian partisans. On the back, in faint pencil, was written, "For those who fought unseen." No official record ever confirmed whether the men in the picture were from Donovan's unit. But to the villagers, the image was proof that they had lived, at least for a little while after the blast. Proof that somewhere, for a few fleeting days, these men continued their fight in silence. The mystery deepened rather than closed. Each discovery, the coded marks, the missing prisoners, the blurred photograph, only added to the growing sense that something extraordinary had happened in those hills. And yet, every trail led to the same unanswered question. If the OSS team was truly captured or killed, why did the German network collapse so completely afterward? The answer, it seemed, still lay hidden in the ashes of Monteomburo. By April 1944, the war in Italy had entered a new and uncertain phase. The Allies had broken through at Anzio, Rome was within reach, and the German High Command struggled to maintain cohesion among its retreating divisions. Yet across northern Italy, Modena, Bologna, and the Po Valley, confusion reigned. Orders were misrouted, convoys vanished, and units acted without direction. To most, it looked like the natural chaos of war. But in the quiet offices of OSS headquarters in Naples, analysts began to see a pattern, one that pointed back to a single night in March and the vanished team of Captain James Donovan. Intercepts from Allied signal intelligence painted a strange picture. The once steady stream of German transmissions from the Modena sector had collapsed. Even more puzzling, false orders began circulating among Axis divisions, orders that redirected fuel shipments to the wrong depots or sent reinforcements to already abandoned sectors. It was as if someone was feeding them their own confusion, recalled Lieutenant Colonel Harold Stone, one of the senior cryptanalysts stationed at Naples. Something had broken in their system, something deliberate. The timing matched the destruction of the Monteombro relay. But there was more. Newly decrypted messages indicated that a temporary radio frequency, previously attributed to the destroyed station, was broadcasting again. Only this time, the transmissions didn't align with known German call patterns. Analysts suspected they were receiving falsified German orders from an unknown source. The leading theory within OSS, Donovan's men, or those working with them, had somehow infiltrated the enemy network before or during the sabotage. To the OSS leadership, the possibility was electrifying and terrifying. If true, the team might have accomplished something unprecedented, using the enemy's own communications infrastructure against them. But it also meant that any survivors were deep behind enemy lines, operating under constant risk of exposure. Officially, no such operation existed. Unofficially, it might have changed the trajectory of the Italian campaign. Throughout the spring and summer of 1944, the effects were visible across the battlefield. The German 10th Army, tasked with defending the northern front, experienced repeated logistical failures. Ammunition shipments disappeared en route, reinforcements arrived days late, and supply depots found themselves abandoned without orders. After-action reports from British 8th Army noted significant enemy disarray, likely the result of compromised communications. Historians later connected these breakdowns to a shift in German encryption methods implemented in late March 1944, the same week Operation Ravenwood went silent. German field commanders were ordered to revert to older, less secure codes until new cipher keys could be distributed. It was a temporary fix that proved disastrous, allowing Allied cryptanalysts in Bletchley Park to read enemy orders more easily. For the Allies, the Italian front suddenly became more predictable. For the Germans, it was chaos. Was this mere coincidence, or the unseen hand of a vanished team still manipulating the airwaves? OSS officers were divided. Major Harkins, in a memorandum dated May 2, wrote, "Evidence suggests continued disruption consistent with Ravenwood's objectives. Cannot rule out operational continuity by surviving personnel or partisan allies. Recommend silence maintained. Success depends on secrecy." Meanwhile, partisan accounts continued to trickle in from the Apennine region. One fighter, Giovanni Ferri, recalled guiding 2 Allied operatives through the mountains in late March. "They spoke little," he said, "but one had a wounded arm and carried a German radio pack. They asked for directions to the road north, toward the Po." Another partisan, interviewed years later, mentioned seeing coded leaflets distributed to resistance groups, each stamped with the image of a raven. To the OSS, the raven symbol was more than coincidence. It was a direct nod to Donovan's mission name, Ravenwood. By the summer, the German command's grip on northern Italy had begun to falter. Convoys failed to reach their destinations, and entire divisions were caught off guard by Allied offensives. The collapse of communications was so severe that Field Marshal Kesselring himself issued a furious directive demanding an investigation into enemy interference with internal channels. None of his staff could explain how it was happening. After the war, declassified German records revealed that during this period, the Modena sector reported phantom transmissions, orders bearing the correct encryption headers but originating from non-existent locations. It's likely these falsified orders caused the logistical breakdown that crippled the German defense. whether orchestrated by surviving OSS agents, sympathetic radio technicians, or partisans trained by Donovan's team, remains one of the great unsolved questions of the Italian campaign. But as the war pushed north and the front lines moved beyond the Apennines, the traces of Operation Ravenwood faded. By late 1944, the OSS officially closed the file, marking all members as missing, presumed deceased. Yet within intelligence circles, the mission became legend, cited quietly as a turning point in the covert war against Nazi Germany. Years later, a report from the U.S. Army Signal Corps summarized the impact of the unexplained disruptions. Between March and May 1944, German communications in northern Italy experienced a sustained degradation unmatched elsewhere on the Western Front. The cause remains unknown. The effect, however, was decisive. In the ruins of the Medina transmitter, locals sometimes found twisted bits of metal fused to glass, remnants of the destroyed relay equipment. Children would play among the rubble, unaware that the silent wreckage had once carried orders that shaped the course of the war. Somewhere in those same hills, the people of Montefiorino still tell stories. They say that for weeks after the explosions, a voice in broken German would sometimes echo through old radios left behind by retreating soldiers, short, fragmented messages that ended each night the same way. For Italian, Die Nacht bleibt schwarz. For Italy, the night remains dark. No one ever confirmed where those transmissions came from, or who sent them. But for those who listened, they were a reminder that even in the darkest hours of war, a handful of men could change the fate of nations, and then vanish, leaving only silence behind. When the war ended in 1945, Italy lay in ruins. Cities were gutted, families displaced, and entire villages wiped from the map. Amid the rebuilding, Allied records were compiled, missions were declassified, and medals were quietly awarded. But one operation, Ravenwood, remained a ghost. No ceremony, no recognition. Just a single folder stamped, classified, eyes only, locked away in the OSS archives. 4 years, the story of Captain James Donovan and his team existed only as rumor. Veterans whispered about the lost unit in Medina, a mission that succeeded so completely it was erased from history. It wasn't until the 1970s, when portions of OSS files were declassified, that fragments of the truth began to surface. Among the released documents was a heavily redacted mission log, coordinates of a drop zone, dates of coded transmissions, and a final entry written in Donovan's own hand. The note was brief, just 5 words: "We go silent from here." Historians were fascinated. The file revealed that the team's objective wasn't simply to destroy a communication relay. It was to seize cipher materials and disrupt German coordination across northern Italy. The destruction of the relay station had been the diversion. Their true mission was far riskier: infiltration and deception within the enemy network itself. In hindsight, it explained the mysterious phantom transmissions that plagued German forces after March 1944. But the deeper investigators looked, the stranger the file became. Several pages were missing. The section labeled Post-Operation Communication had been deliberately removed. A memo from 1946 noted, "Information transferred to higher authority, London, CS liaison." That single line suggested British intelligence might have assumed control of whatever followed. Yet when MI6 archives were opened decades later, no such record existed. Then came a remarkable discovery. In 1991, an Italian historian researching partisan networks found a crate sealed in the basement of a former resistance safehouse near Bologna. Inside were uniforms, faded photographs, and a water-damaged notebook written in English. The notebook's cover bore the name P. Mallory, the OSS team's radio officer. Its contents were nearly illegible, but one page stood out. Translated, it read, "Still transmitting under false code. Axis believes signal genuine. Using confusion to aid advance. Ravenwood complete. For those who did not return, remember us not as ghosts, but as echoes." This revelation suggested that at least one member of the team had survived long enough to see the German retreat and perhaps even lived to witness the liberation of northern Italy. Yet there were no further entries. The final page ended mid-sentence, as if the writer had been interrupted or captured. modern historians continue to debate what really happened. Some argue that Donovan's men were captured and executed after their sabotage. Others believe they lived on among the partisans, helping coordinate Allied radio deception operations that continued until the war's end. The timing of the Medina disruption and the success of the Allied advance north remain too closely aligned to dismiss as coincidence. Even now, in the archives of the CIA and Britain's SIS, certain documents relating to Operation Ravenwood remain sealed under national security provisions. There's also the matter of the coded markings found in the burned monastery, once thought to be random scorch marks, later recognized as partial enigma sequences. When cross-referenced decades later with decrypted German traffic, those fragments corresponded precisely to the communication keys used during the same week of the relay's destruction. If true, Donovan's team had not only destroyed a major German node but potentially captured its encryption settings before doing so, a feat that would have crippled Axis coordination across Italy. In 2004, the U.S. Army's Center of Military History quietly added a footnote to its records of OSS operations in Europe. Operation Ravenwood, conducted March 1944, Northern Italy. Objective: sabotage of German communications facility. Result: strategic success, personnel unaccounted for. That single line marked the first time the mission was officially acknowledged. Still, no medals were ever issued, and no graves ever found. The valley near Monte Omburo remains quiet, only the outlines of old stone foundations, moss-covered cables, and the wind threading through the mountains. Each year, on the anniversary of Italy's liberation, the villagers of Montefiorino light candles along the ridge where parachutes were once seen drifting through the night. They call it La Notte dei Corvi, the Night of the Ravens. Few of them know the full story, but the legend endures, of 8 men who fell from the sky, destroyed an enemy that couldn't see them coming, and vanished into history. In one surviving OSS letter from Major Harkins to Donovan's sister, he wrote, "Your brother's mission was among the most dangerous we ever attempted. He knew the risks. He also knew the value of what he fought for. Whatever became of him, his work helped shorten the war. Some victories cannot be marked with flags." The truth behind Operation Ravenwood, the secret OSS raid that changed the war in Italy, remains a mosaic of facts, fragments, and fading memories. Perhaps the final answer lies buried beneath the monastery ruins, or hidden in an archive still sealed to this day. What is certain is that a small group of men, acting in the shadows, managed to cripple an empire's ability to fight, and in doing so, vanished into the very silence they had created. Even now, over the same valleys where their parachutes once descended, the radio static hums faintly on certain frequencies. Locals claim that on clear nights, it almost sounds like a voice repeating a phrase in English, old, distorted, and barely audible through the static. Ravenwood complete. Mission silent. Godspeed.